Since you brought it up, let's take a look at who voted in this election. There was a lot of talk before the election and that race would play an issue. Did it? Well, you decide. Here's a look at the numbers. An overwhelming 95% of African American voters chose Senator Obama. 66% Hispanic voters, 62% Asian voters. The white vote more closely split with a 55% majority swinging slightly to Senator McCain.
56% of women voters also chose Obama. The totals among male voters just about split down the middle, 49 Obama to 48 McCain. And when we look at the age groups, Obama's highest support among younger voters with 66% in the 18 to 29 set his lowest coming on the other end of the spectrum with 45% of votes among those 65 and older. Voters between 30 and 64 split about equally among the candidates.
And speaking of women, I just heard on the radio this morning that 70% of single women apparently voted for Senator Obama. When it came down to the household income split in this presidential race, the vote is split among those earning more than $50,000 a year. But with families making less than $50,000, the figure jumps up significantly to 60% in support of Senator Obama, with just 31% going to McCain. Do any of these numbers surprise you, gentlemen?
I'm not terribly surprised. If you look at those numbers closely, it's about what I would have expected. I would have thought that the white vote would be a little closer perhaps, but it's not surprising that African American vote and Hispanic vote and all those other demographics are the way they appear to be. It makes sense to me.
Well, the one that surprises me actually is the income. The idea that those families making less than $50,000 a year were 60% in support of Obama. It certainly fits with the people vote with their pocketbooks idea. But you know, when I think in terms of places like Tennessee, Arkansas, whatnot, I mean, I'm thinking those families that are making less than $50,000 a year tend to be more rural kinds of areas. Now, that's not true across the country, but it certainly works in areas around the South. And those also tend to be traditionally much more conservative areas as well, and I'm honestly a little surprised by that number. I would be interested to see what education was, which is one statistic that we don't have, what the breakdown on that would have been.
Now moving on to some other big races, Tennessee Republican Senator Lamar Alexander wins his race over the Democratic challenger Bob Tuke with 65% of the vote. 35 U.S. Senate seats were being contested, 23 Republican and 12 Democrats. And Democrats have gained at least 5 seats and now have a 54-40 advantage with 4 races undecided right now. They will not get a filibuster-proof Senate majority of 60, however.
And in the new Congress, Democrats will have 253 seats, Republicans 184, with 8 of those currently undecided, a net gain of at least 19 seats for Democrats in Washington. No big changes for our representation in Congress, however. In U.S. House District 5 in Tennessee, Democrat Jim Cooper holds on to his seat with 64% of the vote. And in District 6, Democrat Bart Gordon also wins handily with 74% of the vote. Senator Obama's victory, President-elect Obama's victory, and Democrats' gains in the House and Senate in Washington gave their strongest governing position, or gives their strongest governing position in Washington in the post-Watergate era, getting my words all mixed up here, since the post-Watergate election in 1976. Huge change there. What changes will we most likely see with this shift?
Well, I would preface what I want to say about it with this comment. It's one thing to win an election. It's another thing to govern. Now the Democrats have to govern. The pressure is on the Democrats in the Congress as well as the White House. They control the whole thing now, and so people are going to expect some results.
Right.
And I think, number one, they have got to deal with the economic problems this country faces. Number two, I think they've got to deal with energy independence because that's related to the economy. Until we become energy independent, we're going to continue to have economic problems if we have to depend on OPEC and their control of petroleum. And so they've got to govern. I think a lot of people are going to say, okay, you talked about health care, you got a Democratic majority, now what are you going to do about health care? And so I think that's going to be a priority for the Democrats.
Is it a bit of a no-win situation, though? No matter who won this election, they're coming into a situation where we're at war, our economy stinks. Do you think it's a bit of a no-win?
I'm going to pray very hard for the new president and the new Congress, because it is a tough, tough situation. And, but it was a tough situation when Franklin Roosevelt came into office. He was elected in 1932. The country, the Great Depression had just started, the stock market collapsed. So that was a tough situation. But he took the bull by the horns, and he made some tough decisions, and he made some unpopular decisions. And some people wanted to throw him out because of those unpopular decisions. But he was elected 4 times by the American people. In part, I think, because he made those tough decisions and he turned the country around. And I think President-elect Obama is going to have to do something similar to that. Maybe not as dramatic, but something similar.
Well, I think the biggest problem that they're going to have is basically the idea of getting it done relatively quickly. Americans do not have a particularly long attention span, I'm sorry to say. So, and we really, as odd as it is, we like divided government. So the fact that both the Congress and the President are all in one hands is not a situation I would expect to last very long. I would assume that by the 2010 midterms, there's a good chance it could swing back the other way. Even Roosevelt had that problem. I mean, at the very beginning, it was a Democratic Congress. By the time you get to the war, things have shifted back. By the 38 elections for Roosevelt, he's got a Republican Congress, which makes things a little bit more difficult for him.
You know, the irony is, and I agree with Grady, we don't like a Congress controlled by one party and the same party controlling the White House. We like a divided government, we think. But then we fuss about a stalemate. Well, they can't get anything done. Well, the way to get something done, it seems to me, is to have a Democratic Congress and a Democratic president. And if they don't get something done, I think the American people will take care of that at the next election. So now is the time, and my understanding is that the president-elect is off to an early start. He knows time is short. He's got to put his government in place, his cabinet, make all those decisions, plan for an inauguration, and he's got to hit the ground running because there'll be another election in 2 years.
Yes.
Well, in Tennessee, John McCain won 57% of the vote, apparently helping down ballot races in the state House and Senate. Republicans gained 4 seats in the state House, shifting it to a 50-49 Republican majority, and most likely a new speaker. The GOP also increased its majority in the Senate by 3 seats, and it appears Lieutenant Governor Ron Ramsey will hold on to his position as speaker there. Representative McDonald, how do you think this change, you know, in the climate here is going to affect things at the Capitol in January?
Well, it's going to be a new ball game. It's going to be very different because we had a 16-16-1 split in the Senate. Even though Ramsey was elected speaker, it was still pretty evenly divided in the Senate. Now it is not, as you pointed out. The House is the dramatic change. It's the first time since Reconstruction that the House and Senate are now both controlled by the Republicans. It's pretty interesting to look at this on the national level. Nationwide, the Democrats gained 4 legislative bodies across the country, and the Republicans only gained 2. The 2 that they gained were Oklahoma and Tennessee. But look at the totals. Democrats control 27 of the legislative bodies across the country. I'm talking about House and Senate. The Republicans control 14. The balance is split. You know, the House and the Senate are different. There's only one state that is nonpartisan, and that's Nebraska. So if you look at the big picture, the Democrats control the White House, they control the U.S. House of Representatives, they control the U.S. Senate, they control 27 of the 50 general assemblies or legislative bodies across the country. Unfortunately, Tennessee did make a change, and we'll see how that works out. Now let me say this, and I've been there, so I have a little insight. It's 50-49. That is very, very, very close. I have seen Democrats vote with Republicans on the floor, and I have seen Republicans vote with Democrats on the floor. It is not straight party line as some people might expect. So what does that mean? That means that a good piece of legislation is likely to be passed, and a bad piece of legislation is likely to fail. And that close 50-49, that's not a huge mandate for the Republicans in the House of Representatives.
I'd like to piggyback off of this for just a second. One of the things I heard on the radio this morning, it's so fascinating that you broke it down as far as the President, Congress, and then the state as well. I believe it was a state senator from Tennessee was saying that one of the things that Tennessee is now going to be is essentially a bellwether is that since so many of these state initiatives in the nationwide election passed that tended to be conservative, like Proposition 8 in California, some of the anti-abortion measures, that a lot of those are going to have a chance now to really move forward in Tennessee. Tennessee is going to become kind of the vanguard of a lot of those kinds of initiative proposals, which I thought was very interesting given the overall wins for Democrats and that the split is really not that dramatic here in the state.